America is a wide land, mountains older than memory, deserts untouched by footsteps, forests still hiding stories that never made it into books. But among all the forgotten places scattered across this country, one stands apart, a town swallowed by silence, a town erased not by time, but by order, a town the government cleared in a single sweep, leaving behind roads that lead nowhere, houses locked without explanation, and a history that refuses to rest. This place is not fiction. It's not a ghost story told around a campfire. It is a real American town, emptied by federal force in 1974 and left to rot for reasons that still divide historians. Shot, rusted road signs, boarded windows, cracked pavement disappearing into trees. They call it Helltown, and the name is earned. The feeling of Helltown. When you first drive in, it feels ordinary, a quiet stretch of rural Ohio. But the deeper you go, the heavier the air becomes. The forest grows thicker, the roads tighter, and suddenly, you realize there are no people, not one. Even in daylight, the homes stand like tombstones. Doors sealed, curtains frozen, paint peeling like old skin. A local photographer once said, "It felt like I was trespassing in a place that didn't want strangers." Visitors often describe the same strange feeling, a sense that someone is watching from the tree line. This documentary is not here to prove ghosts exist. This is not about demons or curses. This is a story about America's strangest empty town. A town abandoned by order, fed by rumor, and reborn as one of the nation's most disturbing legends. The letter that killed a town. In December 1974, residents of Boston, Ohio opened their mailboxes and found a letter that changed everything. A letter stamped with the seal of the United States government. A letter that said, in short, "Your home will be taken. You must leave." The government called it a land acquisition for national recreation. But the way it was executed, the speed, the scale, the secrecy, newspapers at the time questioned it. Locals protested it. And yet, the process continued without slowing. Entire families who lived there for generations had weeks to evacuate. And when they left, something unusual happened. The government didn't demolish the homes, didn't build anything new, didn't restore the land. The town was simply left there, frozen in place. This is where Helltown begins. Not with demons, not with cults, but with a real government operation whose silence created a storm of fear. The legend begins. As the town emptied, strange things started happening. People reported locked houses with lights flickering inside. Teenagers saw silhouettes in windows. Visitors heard footsteps behind them that stopped the moment they turned. One man who drove through at dusk said, "It felt like a place waiting for something." Rumors grew faster than the forest. Some said the town was destroyed because something dangerous was discovered. Others claimed the government covered up a disaster. And some insisted darker forces lived in the woods long before the evacuation. But the truth, the real truth, is more complicated and far more chilling. What this documentary will uncover. Today we step inside Helltown. We will explore the facts. What the government wrote, what the newspapers documented, what the residents still say, and why the town is locked away even today. We'll separate truth from fiction, but we won't ignore the strange stories that define the place. Because in America, abandoned towns don't stay silent on their own. Something, human or not, keeps their stories alive. Welcome to Helltown. Every strange story has a beginning, but Helltown's beginning felt more like an execution. Slow zoom on an old government envelope on a table, a yellowed paper, an official seal, a message delivered with no warning, no explanation. On a freezing December morning in 1974, the residents of Boston, Ohio woke to a notice in their mailboxes. It wasn't a bill. It wasn't a friendly reminder. It was a command. Your property is being claimed for federal use. Vacate the premises. Just like that, a normal American town was told to disappear. The evacuation that didn't feel right. There have been government buyouts before. Farmland, riversides, flood zones. But this one was different. Families not only lost their homes, they were told to leave fast. Some residents reported officials knocking on doors before sunrise. Others said the papers were slipped in during the night. One elderly woman later told a reporter, "It felt like we were being pushed out before we had time to ask why." This is where confusion turned into unease. Newspapers ran sympathetic headlines. But even they struggled to understand the urgency. Why the rush? Federal plans unclear. Residents demand explanation. But no answers came. Not from Washington. Not from the National Park Service. Not even from Ohio officials. A quiet operation was underway, and once the last resident left, the story should have ended. But instead, it got darker. The town left in suspended animation. When towns are emptied, they're usually bulldozed, cleaned, rebuilt, or at least fenced off. But not Boston, Ohio. Here's where it gets chilling. Almost every house was left standing, roof intact, windows boarded, furniture still inside some of them, plates sitting on tables, toys in the corner of children's rooms, like the families left in the middle of their lives. A visiting columnist from 1975 wrote, "The town looks evacuated, not abandoned. Cars still parked under overgrown vines, church pews still lined in neat rows, an old gas station with the sign still dangling in the breeze." Nothing about Helltown felt natural. It felt staged, preserved, like a scene frozen in the moment before something terrible happened. The government's cold silence. People wrote letters demanding answers. Some residents started petitions. A small group even traveled to Washington hoping for an explanation. All they received were carefully worded statements. Land acquisition for recreational development, future park expansion. But no development ever happened. No rebuilding, no recreation area, no restoration. Decades passed, and the town remained locked, boarded, guarded by silence. Locals who lived near Helltown insisted the government was hiding something. One former law enforcement officer said in a televised interview, "We were told not to patrol too deep. Just keep the signs up, nothing more." Signs reading, "Road closed. No trespassing. Area closed indefinitely." Indefinitely, a word that stretches on forever. The first whispers of fear. And this is where the dark stories began. It started small. Hikers reporting eerie sounds at dusk. Footsteps pacing behind them. Branches cracking in perfect rhythm with their breath. Then came the sightings. Shadows lurking in empty houses. Figures standing behind boarded windows. People claiming to see silhouettes in the church doorway. Some said they saw a woman in a long dress walking along the old main road. She didn't react. Didn't look up. Just walked into the forest and vanished. Was it a ghost? A lost visitor? A trick of the fog? Nobody knows. But the legend of Helltown had taken its first breath. The bus in the woods. One of the eeriest images that emerged in those early years was the abandoned school bus deep in the forest. People argued about how it got there, why it was never moved, why it was left intact when everything else was sealed. Kids dared each other to go inside. Some swore they heard breathing in the dark. Others said they felt the seat cushions warm, as if someone just stood up moments before they entered. Of course, officially, there were no deaths connected to this bus. No missing children, no accidents. But logic doesn't matter in a place where silence is heavier than truth. By the late 1970s, Helltown had become a magnet for fear. Not because of monsters, but because of unanswered questions. Why was the town taken so suddenly? Why did the government leave everything untouched? Why the dead silence? Why the signs warning people to stay out forever? Whatever happened here, the answers weren't buried. They were simply never given. And when a town is emptied without explanation, the shadows fill in the blanks. When a town is abandoned, nature erases it. Roof collapses, walls rot, glass shatters. Within 10 years, most places disappear under vines and rain. But Helltown refused to fall apart. And that's the first thing investigators noticed: the houses that stayed alive. Drive down Stanford Road today and you'll see something almost unnatural. Houses that look frozen in mid-decay. Not destroyed, not preserved, just paused. White paint still clings to wooden siding. Front porches still stand straight. Even mailboxes remain upright, untouched by decades of storms. A local contractor who inspected the area in the early 80s said, "It's the strangest structural condition I've ever seen. These houses should have collapsed by now, but they didn't. They just sit there, as if the moment the last resident left, time seeped out of the air and the entire neighborhood stopped aging." Some call it coincidence. Others say the government may have done preparatory reinforcement, but nobody ever confirmed it, and the silence only made the legend stronger. The church with the watching windows. Now we arrive at the most unsettling structure in Helltown, the Boston Community Church. From the outside, nothing screams fear, No broken crosses. No mysterious symbols. Just a quiet little church with pointed windows. But here's the catch. Those windows feel like eyes. Locals swear that standing in front of the building creates a sensation of being observed, even when the place is empty. One ranger admitted off record, "It's not the look of the church. It's the silence around it. When the wind blows, the trees move. But the church doesn't make a sound. Not a creak. Not a groan. Not even a whisper from the old wood. It's like the building is holding its breath." And then there's the most disturbing detail. Despite decades of storms, lightning strikes, and freezing winters, the church never loses its shape. No major structural damage. No collapse. No natural wear that explains its survival. Some locals believe the building was protected. Others believe it was avoided. Either way, the church stands tall, waiting for someone to step too close. The roads that end without warning. Helltown has roads that look normal, until they don't. There are dead-end roads in America, but this is different. Here the pavement simply stops, not gradually. Not broken, just ends like the town was still under construction. The most infamous one is Stanford Road, known among locals as the end-of-the-world road. At night, headlights bounce off a solid wall of trees. It feels like driving straight toward a void. A former deputy said, "That road feels wrong. Even GPS signals glitch out." Visitors complain of phones shutting off, flashlights flickering, cars stalling for a second, air growing colder as they approach the blocked section. Scientific explanation? Maybe magnetic interference from underground metal. Real explanation? No one has checked. Mystery? Guaranteed. The Forbidden Trail. Deep inside the old park area lies a trail that rangers refuse to talk about publicly. There are no signs, no markings, no official name, but locals call it the trail that doesn't want you back. People who hike it alone often report disorientation, visual glitches, trees shifting, hearing footsteps behind them, feeling watched from the ridge, sudden dread that forces them to turn around. Most hikers don't even reach the halfway point. A few said the trail becomes silent, too silent, as if all wildlife retreats deeper into the forest. One visitor described the feeling perfectly. It wasn't fear. It was rejection, like the woods themselves were pushing us out. Rangers deny the trail is dangerous. They claim the odd sensations come from uneven terrain and thick canopy. But then why? Why is it the only trail consistently blocked every spring? They never explain. The trail remains closed, and the mystery grows with every passing year. Ranger reports they won't discuss on camera. In the early years after evacuation, park rangers kept written logs. Normal logs, wildlife sightings, patrol notes, minor incidents. But hidden between the lines were unusual entries. Heard unknown movement near the abandoned shops. No visual. Lights in the church window. No footprints found. Report of figure on trail. Investigated. Nothing present. Sound of something large moving after dark. Few of these reports made it to newspapers. Most were quietly archived. A former ranger interviewed anonymously for a podcast said, "There are things we couldn't put in official logs. We saw shapes, heard voices, and sometimes we felt things." He refused to elaborate. Said he needed the job too much at the time, but the message was clear. Something in the woods made experienced rangers uneasy. And that brings us to the most unsettling question yet. Why did even the people assigned to work in Helltown feel like outsiders? The underground rumor. This part isn't folklore. It's a genuine theory that circulated in the 1990s and still exists today. Locals believe there are sealed underground spaces beneath Helltown, possibly old storage bunkers, old cellar systems, or something the government built during the buyout. Why do they believe this? Because hikers reported standing on ground that sounded hollow, like something empty was beneath them. No official maps show underground structures. The government denies any such construction, and no one has ever dug to confirm it. But the hollow sound remains consistent, localized, specific. Whatever lies beneath, the land refuses to reveal. Helltown doesn't scare people with ghosts or monsters. It scares them with the feeling that something is unfinished. Structures that don't fall, roads that end abruptly, a church that seems alive, ranger reports that fade into silence, a trail that pushes people back, and rumors of something underground, waiting. In an ordinary town, these would be separate events. But in a town the government evacuated in one sweep, then abandoned without reason, every unexplained detail becomes a piece of a puzzle that no one has ever completed. Helltown isn't empty. It's paused. And whatever hit the pause button, never press play again. They say America never sleeps. But on December 27, 1974, one small town in Ohio went silent forever. Not because of a disaster, not because of a disease, not because of a chemical leak, but because the United States government showed up and told everyone to get out. No warning, no negotiation. Just one sentence: leave now. And this is where the story stops being tragic and starts becoming terrifying. The papers that got quiet, too quiet. See, normally when towns are evacuated, newspapers explode with coverage. Journalists flood the area. Everyone asks the same question: why? But in Helltown, the local papers wrote one article, then never mentioned it again. The Cleveland Plain Dealer printed, "Homes being reclaimed for national park expansion." A short line, dry, no detail, no interviews, no follow-ups. As if someone told them, print this, nothing else. And they obeyed. Because after that day, reporters who tried to investigate stopped showing up. Some locals say they were told to stay off federal land. Others claim journalists were escorted out by men without badges, but with authority. The day the roads died, locals still remember what happened next. Metal barricades, concrete blocks, steel government signs no one had seen before. Not the wooden trail-closed signs, not the usual national park warnings. No, these signs had a different tone. Absolutely no entry. Dangerous, do not proceed. Restricted by order of U.S. government. And they weren't placed politely. They were slammed into the ground like a threat. One former resident said, it felt like they were shutting the place down to trap something in. Not keep us out. When the interviewer asked what he meant, the call mysteriously dropped, and he never returned the line. The army arrives with no badge of reason. Here's where the story leaves the normal world. Multiple locals, farmers, hunters, bus drivers, reported seeing military trucks rolling into Boston Township at night. Not in daylight, not with announcements, but in the dead quiet of 2 a.m. They weren't regular National Guard trucks. Witnesses described long, black, unmarked vehicles. Headlights off, engines humming like generators. One man said they saw soldiers carrying equipment like scanning devices. Another claimed to see men in hazmat suits entering the abandoned church. The same one people already feared because of the upside-down cross carved into its door. Of course, when asked about these operations, the U.S. Army officially said, no military activity was conducted in the Boston Township region during the 1974-1981 land transfer. Straight, cold, zero emotion, almost too perfect, like someone wrote the answer for them. The night scream started. When a place gets evacuated, you expect silence, but that's not what happened here. For months after the shutdown, residents in neighboring towns kept reporting animal-like screams, echoing wails from the forest, loud booms underground, strange metallic humming at night. And every time someone called the sheriff's office, the answer was always the same. It's wildlife adjusting to relocation. Except the wildlife wasn't relocating, the humans were. Something else was moving in those woods. Hunters still talk about being watched and hearing footsteps too heavy to belong to any animal in Ohio. One hunter said, it wasn't walking, it was marching. And before he could finish his interview years later, he stopped, looked behind him, and said, I shouldn't be talking about this. He never spoke on record again. The government acts like the town isn't real. Here's the strangest part. When researchers filed Freedom of Information Act requests to get documents about Helltown's evacuation, something bizarre happened. Dozens of files came back with pages blacked out, whited out, or missing entirely. The official explanation? These documents were lost during archival reorganization. But every missing document belongs to the same time period. The exact days when Helltown was evacuated. The exact days when those trucks arrived. The exact days when the screams began. Coincidence? Western investigators don't think so. You shouldn't either. By this point in the story, you'd think the government evacuation was the strangest part. But no, the real nightmare began after the humans left. Because when people disappear, nature isn't the only thing that moves in. Sometimes the unknown takes the empty space. The cave they won't put on a map. In 1978, 4 years after the evacuation, a group of local teens claimed they discovered a blocked-off tunnel deep in the woods near the abandoned school. It wasn't a natural cave. It had cut stone walls, broken metal brackets, and an entrance covered with fresh concrete. Not old, not weathered, Fresh. One of the teens said, "It looked like someone sealed it recently. And fast. They swear they heard air moving inside, as if the tunnel continued far deeper underground. But when they returned the next day with flashlights, the entire area was surrounded by new federal fencing, and 2 unmarked trucks were parked nearby. The teens ran. And to this day, that cave is nowhere on Google Earth. No map, no record. Locals call it the tunnel that never existed, the Beast on Stairs Road. Before the evacuation, hunters reported seeing a creature near a road known as Stairs Road. Not a ghost, not a shadow, something alive. One hunter described it as tall as a person, skin pale like ash, limbs too long, standing completely still, breathing visibly in the cold air. And the worst part, it didn't run when he shined a light on it. It didn't blink. It didn't even flinch. It just tilted its head, as if trying to understand what it was looking at. The hunter fired a warning shot, and the creature didn't react. He fired a second, and it moved. Not backwards, not sideways. It moved straight up the embankment, on all fours, faster than anything he'd ever seen. He never hunted again. Years later, when the government sealed the area, locals whispered that the evacuation was not about trees or land or park expansion. It was about whatever lived near Stairs Road. In 1991, 3 teenagers went hiking near the old church. They never entered any forbidden zone. They stayed on a public trail. But they heard something. 7 screams. Not together, but spaced out. Each scream was louder, deeper, closer. The boys ran back to town, crying and shaking. A search team went out the next morning, but found nothing. "Here's what makes it chilling," one of the rescuers said privately. "Those weren't animal screams, and they weren't human either." Another rescuer quit his job 2 weeks later and moved out of the county. He never explained why. The religious symbol they weren't allowed to talk about. During the evacuation, federal agents ordered the local church to be sealed. Publicly, they said it was for structural instability, but a former maintenance worker confessed something before he died. Inside the church, on the floor under the pulpit, there was a massive symbol carved into the stone. Not Christian, not satanic, not Native American, something else. Something he said he had never seen before. He described it as a circle with hooks, almost like it was meant to hold something down or keep something in. When the church was demolished, the government shipped every broken piece of the floor to a location in West Virginia. Why? Official statement. Material analysis. Unofficial rumor. They didn't want anyone to see the mark again. The night the forest turned blue, locals from outside town reported seeing a glow, a deep blue light, coming from inside the sealed-off region. It lasted for 3 minutes, then disappeared. One resident said, "It was like lightning stuck inside the woods." Another said, "The trees lit up like bones." The government's response? Predictable. Atmospheric refraction. But people in the Midwest know the sky. They know storms. They know lightning. This wasn't sky. This was something inside the forest, and it was bright enough to be seen from 6 miles away. Decades passed. Maps changed. Laws were drawn. People moved on. But legends cling stubbornly to the shadows. By 2020, Helltown still breathes in half-light and whispers. Legal gray zone and protection. The park, plus private lands. In recent years, the area formerly known as Helltown has been absorbed, at least partially, into Cuyahoga Valley National Park, CVNP, and other private parcels. That means some of the land is federally protected, restrictions strong, no trespassing, no exploring abandoned buildings, no loitering after dark. What remains of the old structures, barns, ruins, are often guarded or blocked. Entry into many rumored haunted zones is officially prohibited. Exploring them involves serious legal risk, trespassing charges, sometimes jail or fines. So for many thrill seekers now, the danger is not just legends, it's real legal danger. That changes the game entirely. Helltown isn't a ghost town anymore, and it's a locked property, said a 2024 legal guide on visiting Helltown. Demolition and disappearing ruins. By 2016, most of the abandoned houses and alleged haunted buildings were torn down or removed by 2016. The result, many of the classic Helltown landmarks, rusted houses, old garages, creepy church windows, are gone. What remains? A handful of relics like an old barn, maybe isolated ruins, woods and forest terrain that once surrounded the town. Some heritage historians tried to locate ruins of a blacksmith shop tied to the very old settlement, pre-20th century. But what's left is barely more than broken wood piles and memories. Impact on the legend. When the physical haunted town shrinks, the echoes grow louder. People romanticize what's gone, making Helltown more legend than location. Modern visits, local stories, and folklore, 2020s and after. Even with much removed, Helltown's lore still fuels internet seekers, thrill hikers, and urban legend hunters. Some recent web writing, 2024-2025, still calls it Ohio's most infamous abandoned place. Some ongoing themes. The barn, still referenced by explorers. Many rumors claim it's haunted. Strange noises, cold spots, fleeting shadows. The woods at night, locals claim that walking through certain forest trails gives wrong feelings, as if the forest rejects you. Some say nighttime noises remain, branches snapping with no wind, distant moans, unexplainable cold. The stories persist, even though most evidence was demolished or debunked. People keep retelling the tales. Ghost buses, satanic churches, mutant animals, paranormal sightings. The stories evolve, adapt, becoming folklore, not history. All that's interesting. Interestingly, on writers and commentators now sometimes call the real horror not ghosts or monsters, but the vanishing of truth. What was real erased? What was myth magnified? The danger today: trespassers, ranger patrols, and legal risks. Because of vandalism, abusive explorations, and repeated trespassing attempts, park authorities and local law enforcement have cracked down. Reports in 2024-2025 still warn visitors. Closed areas aren't to be entered, even if rumor says something's inside. Entering derelict buildings, if any remain, is illegal and dangerous. Vandalism, graffiti, or even loitering near restricted zones can lead to arrest. Essentially, what was once a free horror tour location has become a protected, restricted space. What Helltown means in 2025: legend, cautionary tale, or urban myth. By 2025, Helltown lives more in stories than stones. For historians, it's a cautionary tale of eminent domain, abandoned small towns, and what happens when bureaucratic plans overtake human lives. For legend chasers, it's a ghost story and horror myth, the perfect canvas for fear, speculation, and imagination. For the locals and authorities, it's a protected zone, mix of history, environment, privacy. But for everyone who hears the name, Helltown remains a whisper, a place that once existed, a place erased, a place reborn in rumor. As of today, there's no verifiable record of recent paranormal investigations producing credible evidence. There's no official confirmation that haunted houses, ghost buses, or mutant snakes ever existed. What remains is a landscape of absence digging into emptiness. Still, every once in a while, a late-night hiker disappears. A shutter clicks. A headstone is found vandalized. A distant scream echoes from the woods. And in those moments, the legend of Helltown feels alive, because when the world closes the doors, fear finds a way to kick them open again. So now you've walked through the woods they tried to erase, stood in the shadows of a town that no longer exists, and listened to the voices that were never meant to reach the outside world. Helltown isn't just a place on a map. It's a reminder, a warning, proof that some stories die, and some stories refuse to stay buried. Maybe the truth was lost in the bulldozers. Maybe it's hiding behind federal fences, or maybe it still whispers in those trees when the sun goes down. But one thing is certain: what happened here is nowhere near finished. And if you want to go deeper, if you want more mysteries that the world refuses to talk about, then don't disappear. Hit that subscribe button, because the next dark corner we step into might just be the one they never wanted you to see.